Daniel 8:9 has as its immediate application the prophesied rise of Antiochus Epiphanes, ruler of the Seleucid kingdom, whose epicenter of power was Syria. As we have seen, however, much of Old Testament prophecy has a dual application to both nearer and farther-term events, with the tribulation being the primary paradigm of application, so as to provide a point of comparison for near-term tribulation, as well as to provide details about that ultimate tribulation. We have also seen that Antiochus Epiphanes is a particularly important representative type of Antichrist, invading Israel, proclaiming himself to be divine, hence the cognomen Epiphanes, and profaning the temple in a manner that foreshadows Antichrist's future conduct. We may therefore read in the verse quoted both the general pattern of the beast's military expansion and the motivations which underlie it. Since Antichrist already dominates the north and arose in the west, Babylon, only the south, east, and Israel are outside of his complete control at this point, for while he has the secular ruler of Israel in his camp, the ministry of Moses and Elijah will still be in place and flourishing at this point. The expansion towards the south mentioned here refers to the conquest of the Southern Alliance in the two campaigns of Daniel chapter 11, while the eastward expansion is a reference to the progressive occupation and domination of the one other remaining quadrant of the world, not as yet under the beast's direct rule. By the time of Armageddon, we see the east also under Antichrist's command, Revelation 16:12 through 14. Compare the temporary disruption of that control occasioned by the bowl judgments, Daniel 11:44. The final place on earth to succumb to the beast's direct authority will be the land of Israel, and we can see in the pattern of Daniel 8:9 not only a strategy for world domination, but also the primary purpose behind it, replacement of the worship of the one true God with the worship of the devil and his son Antichrist, and the concomitant destruction of God's holy people, Israel. The Southern Alliance will therefore represent the last major military impediment to Antichrist's domination of the world. The combination of economic, political, and military power projected by Babylon, revived Rome, and the growing coalition of the world's nations falling like dominoes at the feet of the beast will remove all other major resistance by the tribulation's midpoint. The two campaigns against the south, through their scale, rapidity, and success, will in particular no doubt also produce a bandwagon effect for joining with, rather than opposing the beast, until the whole unbelieving world shouts with one accord, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" Revelation 13:4. And when he sat down on the Mount of Olives, his disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us when these things will be, and what the sign is of your return and of the end of the age." And Jesus answered and said, "See to it that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will deceive many people. And you are going to hear about actual wars and impending wars. Make sure you do not become overly alarmed by such things. For these things must happen, but this is not yet the end of the tribulation. For before that end a nation will rise against a nation, that is, in general terms, the Japhetic Pan-nation against the Semitic Pan-nation, even a kingdom against a kingdom, that is, Babylon and revived Rome versus the Southern Alliance. And there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. But all these things are merely the beginning of the birth pangs, that is, the first half of the tribulation. Matthew 24:3 through 8. We can see in our Lord's words the significance of the conflict between North and South that will dominate the secular political events of the tribulation's first half, made parallel here to the famines and earthquakes, which, as we have seen, are shorthand for the divine warning trumpet judgments, which will also characterize this period. The wars and impending wars that will occupy the secular world's attention at this time are significant enough to rate special mention by our Lord, and so we may glean from this combination of remarks that the scale of the warfare between the beast's coalition and the Mahdi's alliance, the two most significant nations and kingdoms on earth, will be enormous. Then he, that is the king of the north, Antichrist, will rouse up his power and desire against the king of the south with a great force, but the king of the south will mobilize for war with an equally great force, which will also be very powerful. Daniel 11:25. Rarely in the history of warfare have two coalitions mobilized such exceptional and comparably powerful armies for a particular confrontation. Although August of 1914 may provide a rough parallel in terms of the numbers deployed, the distances involved, the firepower available, the ideological fervor motivating the conflict, and the overall scale involved here, that is, with roughly 2 entire quadrants of the world engaged in this titanic struggle, this campaign is likely only to be eclipsed by the ones which follow, that is, the second campaign of Daniel 11:29 and 30 and 11:40 through 43, and the Armageddon campaign. In addition to all of the other issues involved in these campaigns, both coalitions will also have to contend with the trumpet judgments, which, as we have seen, will be taking place during this entire later period of the tribulation's first half. On the political front, it is at least conceivable that for the consumption of the unbelieving world, Antichrist, in his capacity of pseudo-Messiah, will spin these trumpet judgments as divine displeasure for the world's failure to support Israel, though he himself, of course, has in mind her eventual destruction, thus adding emotional impetus and added justification to his crusade. The people who know their God will not be fooled by this false interpretation, and we can be sure that the truth will be made clear by Moses and Elijah, along with the 144,000, for all who are willing to receive the truth. On the operational front, the events of the trumpet judgments will clearly cause complications for daily life in general, and all the more so for military operations. The probable timeline for these two campaigns with these judgments of divine warning indicates a coincidence of trumpet judgments 3 and 4 with the first campaign, and of trumpet judgment 6 with the second. As the juxtaposition of events makes clear, the initial phase of the first campaign will be conducted in the aftermath of the smiting of the world's fresh water by the Wormwood asteroid, while the world is still suffering under its effects. Then, at roughly the campaign's midpoint, the world's heavenly lights will be stricken, with these effects lasting throughout the rest of the campaign. Just as King Ahab went to great lengths to preserve his military assets during a comparable water shortage, occasioned by divine judgment, and no doubt did so at the expense of his suffering population, 1 Kings 18:2-6, so we may expect that whatever difficulties the population of the earth experiences from the third trumpet judgment, which we are told will result in many fatalities, Revelation 8:11. Both Antichrist and the leader of the Southern Alliance will ensure that their vast armies are not seriously inconvenienced, no matter how much more difficult this may make things for their subject populations. Aside from the logistical problems of transporting additional fresh water over vast distances into terrain that is inhospitable under the best of circumstances, it is probable that the third trumpet will not otherwise seriously affect the course of this campaign, and indeed there is no indication from Daniel chapter 11 that it does. The fourth trumpet judgment, the significant diminution of light which will occur during the 4-month period that coincides with the middle and the end of this campaign, may actually have an enabling effect, for it will virtually ensure that the heat, which might otherwise prove an impediment to the unprecedented marches, this expedition will entail on both sides, will be significantly less than would otherwise be the case. In any event, we may conclude from the scriptural testimony about the fact of this campaign and its successful conclusion on the part of the beast that at the very worst, the negative effects of these two judgments will likely affect both sides equally, and will not, in any case, prevent its successful conclusion by the forces of Babylon and revived Rome.